Cabin Sports Radio.
Here comes the siren. I want to go higher. Oh, my goodness. He's to the drive. Deep left field. No doubt about it. Posey will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
Oh, baby, for sure.
Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Cabin Sports Radio back on the Cabin Radio airwaves. As always, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Mr. Mike Gibbons joining me in the studio once again. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good.
Fantastic.
Lots coming up this show. We got some TSN NHL power rankings to talk about. Good news if you're a fan of a Canadian club. The Miami Miracle. We'll talk some Raptors as well. Thorsten Gohl also joining us live from Fort Providence to talk a little table tennis NT. All that and more coming up as Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Cabin Sports Radio.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Back on the air once again. Yes, they're still letting us do this. How you doing today, unbreakable Mike Gibbons?
I'm doing very well, man. How are you?
Doing quite well. Interesting weekend in the world of sports, especially because the TSN NHL Power Rankings for this week looking very good for Canadian franchises. 3 of the top 5 this week, Canadian clubs. Number 2, Toronto Maple Leafs. Number 3, Calgary Flames. And number 4, Winnipeg Jets. And I say interesting because they both, or all 3 of them, suffered not great-looking losses.
Yeah, not a surprise. Tampa Bay is at the top. A league best 47 points through 31 games. They're looking pretty good. Leafs in second with 41. But yeah, apparently every time the Leafs travel to TD Garden in Boston, they're just going to get blown out. A 6-3 affair. That was actually, the final score was a lot closer than it really felt like. They went up, I think, 5-1 at one point. It was not pretty.
It flattered the Leafs.
It did,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now this is the second game that they're working William Nylander, number 29.
Yes.
Back into the rotation, if you will. I thought it was kind of curious that he was inserted into the top, not the top, line 1B, I guess,
right,
with Matthews right away. They had some good chemistry when he was playing with, I believe it was Hyman, and I don't know if it was Marleau.
I think it was, either I think they kind of went back and forth between Hyman on that left side and Patrick Marleau
they
last
had
year.
Kapanen, I believe, at one point playing with Matthews as well. So I think that was kind of the question after he signed his new 6-year deal last weekend, where they would insert him into the lineup. So I found that kind of curious that right out of the gate, they put him right back with Auston Matthews. He didn't have to earn those minutes with one of the best players in the league. He was just inserted. So maybe they're still trying to find their legs a little bit, find that chemistry again. But yeah, a pretty big loss. 6-3 loss in Boston after being blown out 5-1 the last time there at TD Garden. Boston also pretty undermanned.
Yeah.
They didn't have Zdeno Chara. They did not have Patrice. I think we'll find out with Bergeron the extent of his injury. If he does require surgery, they could be looking at a months-long recovery, maybe even season-ending, depending on the severity. But they were pretty undermanned, and
did not look any worse for wear.
No, they did not.
No. You're missing your top-line center, and this is a team that is, that they're put together in a scrappy, classic Boston fashion. Not necessarily overwhelming depth at center like, say, the Toronto Maple Leafs, at least on paper. You have David Krejci sliding in as the top-line center, and he's been the top-line center before, so he can take on that role. Him and Patrice Bergeron for the better part of the last 7 years have kind of been 1A and 1B as far as the Boston Bruins top-line centers go. But Patrice Bergeron really kind of taken that role over, and Krejci, fallen back a bit more to the more bona fide second-line center. But just sliding in and into the top-line center role and looking like he has been there all along.
It helps when the other two-thirds of that line are David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand, who continue to play extremely well together.
Yes.
David Pastrnak has a pretty good chance at winning the scoring title. He's pretty electric and loves, I think he was quoted at one point, they threw up a quote during the telecast I just love beating Toronto. And you can tell because he loves to light up the Maple Leafs, and he usually does.
And he is quite good at it.
Yes.
Yeah, he just looks phenomenal this year, earning every bit of that contract and more.
A very nice contract.
And by contrast, kind of, at least in the first 2 games since we've seen him, making William Nylander look like, well, were you worth about the same as me or a little bit more? Not so sure now. And I mean, you got to think the Toronto Maple Leafs are kind of looking over their shoulder at the Toronto media now and thinking, really hoping we don't have to like hide this guy or figure out something, or, you know, really hoping it just kind of comes together and William Nylander finds his game legs sooner than later. You know, in this day and age in the NHL, these guys are all in shape, but there is a big difference between being physically fit and being in game shape. And you can see William Nylander is still trying to find his game legs for sure.
Even in recreational sports, it's going to take you you need those reps, you need those runs to get your rhythm back, to get the chemistry back that you had previously established with line mates. Even in his first game back, not a great showing from Toronto. They love to find themselves in early holes, and I think they just think they can rely on their scoring to dig out of it. To be fair, boasting the second best goal differential in the league, only behind the Tampa Bay Lightning, whom they will play on Thursday. They got just began a 5-game road trip, so this will be a good litmus test, I think, an early season one. It's a long season, but there are some games you place a little more emphasis on, and this could be a pretty important road trip for them. Off to not a great start in Boston. They'll visit Florida, Tampa, Carolina as part of this trip as well. So yeah, it's going to take some time. I think I saw today that Nylander was actually practicing on the third line. So I don't know who they would slot him in there, if that's Kadri, or Brown or whoever. It's constantly in flux. It feels like so. But might not be getting those top line 1A or 1B minutes anymore. We'll see.
Rounding out the other 2 Canadian clubs in the top 5 in the TSN NHL Power Rankings for this week. Number 3, the Calgary Flames, who have been absolutely on fire, no pun intended, the past 2 weeks, looking fantastic. And Saturday, a big win against the number 5 seeded team, the Nashville Predators, who are in a bit of a slide, but still good enough to be in that top 5, you know, really without question. But then losing the Battle of Alberta in the back-to-back the following night, last night against the Edmonton Oilers, 1-0 loss to the Oilers. But the Flames really looking legit right now.
Still atop the Western Conference, despite last night's defeat at the hands of the Oilers. You mentioned the Predators. They really do seem to be in a bit of a tailspin. More pedestrian, really. It's not like the wheels have completely come off like they have in St. Louis. 5-5 in their last 10, lost 2 in a row. They are missing some important guys. Subban's out. Rene did not play over the weekend. I believe Arvidsson is out as well. Missing some really key guys. And the Flames were able to capitalize on Saturday. The best third period team in all of hockey. They've scored more goals than anyone else. And interestingly enough, the best comeback team, I believe, in the entire league as well. So you're not able to count them out. They don't seem to be phased if they get down early. And Johnny Gaudreau is just playing at another level right now. Been really hot during this streak. And then also the play of Riddick between the pipes. He's been playing very well. Kind of the same situation you have going on in Edmonton right now. I don't think Hitchcock has come outright saying that it's someone's crease. I think he likes having the rotation between Talbot and between Koskinen, and maybe the same situation in Calgary as well between Mike Smith and Riddick. Riddick got the start last night, other than a Connor McDavid goal, and it was a very good goal. Was perfect on the night. He had another strong performance. You
really can't fault the goaltender when your team can't score a goal. It's really not his fault. Really nice to see Mike Smith find his game again. You know, just a guy that you kind of like to root for. He's been around for a while. He's always been really blue collar, lunch pail kind of goaltender. Had a rough start to this season with the Calgary Flames, and there was a lot of controversy in the first 10 to 15 games of the season as to what was going to happen with the Calgary Flames goaltending situation if they had to make a change there. Mike Smith has been great lately, and and I don't even use that term lightly. He has been really good for the Calgary Flames and has really turned things around and been a big part of the reason as to why they're doing so well. Number 4, the Winnipeg Jets, who just kind of continue to cruise along, lost a disappointing 1-0 loss to the St. Louis Blues Friday night, bounced back with a big 7-1 victory over the Philadelphia Flyers last night. And all three of these teams, I mean, even the top 4, if you want to count Tampa Bay, really getting it done because their big guys are playing like their best players. You got Nikita Kucherov and, of course, Steven Stamkos and Tampa Bay Lightning having a great start to the season. John Tavares and Mitch Marner in the top 10 and top 4, respectively, in points, and I think top 5, maybe Mitch Marner, in goals and points in the league. Calgary Flames, Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, and Elias Lindholm really driving the bus there for that team. And, of course, the Winnipeg Jets, the top line, with Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, and Patrick Laine lighting it up. You got to rely on your big guys to get it done, and those teams have that going right now.
The biggest story coming into this year, it seemed like it constantly dominated headlines, was the Nylander contract situation. We could be in the same situation, Laine, like Matthews, their ELC coming up at the end of this year.
Right.
When do we start talking about that? He's a guy that's put up 21 goals already, 29 games. Probably as good a chance as anyone at eclipsing Ovechkin this year anyways as the best goal scorer in the game. He will certainly be in that conversation. Always potent. It was only a matter of time before he put up 5 in a game.
Yeah.
And he did just that. So scoring at an elite level, at will at times, it feels like. And when you are able to lean on your big guns as much as Winnipeg is, Wheeler playing well, Scheifele playing well. They're getting production across the board. Again, in their last 10, not 6-6-4, so not terrible, but they're sort of even keeled.
Yeah,
it feels like they've faltered a little bit, but they came back with that really big win against the Flyers, who have had a tough go of late. And kind of surprising, the lost game at the hands of the Blues. They have had a very rough stretch of late. I believe they've lost 8 of their past 11. There was a fight at practice today between Bertuzzo and another teammate. It feels like the wheels have come off in St. Louis.
Yeah.
So we'll chalk that up to not a great loss for the Jets, but nice to see they bounce back against Philly.
So a team that is, speaking of Canadian clubs that are rolling along lately, they are not in the top 5 in the power rankings. They sit at number 12, but in their last 10 games, they are 7-2-1. The Edmonton Oilers, once again, making people take notice. They've got, a guy you've probably heard of named Connor McDavid.
Pretty good
who just kind of hangs around and makes things happen. He is continuing to drive the bus there. Since Ken Hitchcock took over, you were saying they haven't lost a game at home? My God. And I mean, when the coaching change was made, you got the sense it was just kind of one of those routine things that things aren't going so well, so we have to make a change. The easiest change to make is always with the head coaching job. So that happened. Ken Hitchcock came in. Our thoughts when we were talking about it a couple weeks ago weren't really sure how it was going to go. I didn't really get the sense that Ken Hitchcock had a reputation as a young coach,
right,
or a young players coach, but proving certainly us wrong. Like I said, 7-2-1 in the last 10 games. Another big revelation for the Oilers has been the play of Mikko Koskinen, who is 9-3-0-1 with a 2.06 goals against average and a 929 save percentage and 3 shutouts. He is picking up where Cam Talbot was struggling a bit.
Yeah, and still struggling. I mentioned earlier that Hitchcock likes playing the two of them. They've said as well that they like that internal competition because they know that on any given night they have to go out and give their best performance and try to get a result because they might not have the crease the next night. I believe they've already confirmed that Koskinen will start tomorrow after coming off a shutout against Calgary last night. But yeah, it was an interesting time. We felt that there was probably a firing in the making, and it wasn't going to be Chiarelli. Usually you'll get two coaches out of a general manager.
Yeah.
The feeling was, I think, that they had to do something now. It was still early enough in the season, and we're only 30 games in. We still have another 50 games to go.
Right.
But they had to do something to make it look like they were trying to salvage this season. It's interesting, but oftentimes American Thanksgiving will sort of be the barometer for if you're in the picture now, chances are very good you'll be in the playoff spot come April. If you're outside looking in, even though it's only, say, 25, 30 games in, that's almost enough of a sample size. And oftentimes the teams that are in the picture now will be in the dance come April. So they felt they had to make the move when they did, and paying immediate dividends. Their style of play has completely changed. Had a really suffocating defense on display last night. The neutral zone just gets completely gobbled up. Entries, it seemed like it was very hard for Calgary to get into the zone, and they're getting great goaltending. Cam Talbot, numbers not so great. I believe it's sub 900 save percentage.
Yeah.
But Koskinen has really stepped up. I think there were a lot of eyebrows raised when that contract was announced. 1 year, $2.5 million. A lot of people probably asking who this guy is. But he has come in and played really, really well. I think the forechecking third line, though, because they sort of struggled with what they were going to do with Milan Lucic, and that contract, as the days went on, began to look worse and worse.
Right.
The 6-year, $42 million contract signed in 2016. Not a guy you can put beside McDavid all the time. He doesn't have the foot speed. We know that. And now Hitchcock has inserted him into a lineup with Cassian, and that's become their sort of grinded out forecheck, and it's been really productive so far. The returns, he's not going to, I think he only has 2 goals in his last 70 some odd games or something like that. He's not lighting the lamp.
No.
But he's being effective in other ways.
But he's laying the body.
That's right. He got in a fight last night as well. So they're firing on all cylinders right now.
Yeah.
They're 1 point out of a playoff spot with a game in hand, 2 games, I think, on Vegas, who's holding down the last spot in a Pacific Division that could be fairly open this year.
Yeah.
A lot of fluctuation, not a whole lot of points between the Oilers and even the Flames at the top of the division, and there's some games at hand. So they have a real chance, I think, to make a run late here.
It's got to be very encouraging to see for Oilers fans, like you mentioned, the Milan Lucic situation. The last year and a half, he really didn't look engaged, you know. And like you said, when you're playing on a big contract like that, and you don't look like you even care,
right?
That is a toxic environment.
I think one of the first things Hitchcock did, and they had a nice tribute for Bob Gohl last night as well as part of the Battle of Alberta. But there was one point during the telecast that they mentioned that one of the first things Hitchcock did, it only took him 3 hours to decide if he wanted the job, came out of retirement after coaching Dallas up until last year. But one of the first things he did was reach out to Lucic's, I believe it was his AHL coach. How can I best use this guy? How can I get the most production out of someone who's going to be on our third line? And based upon what they discussed, it seems like he's reinserted him into one of the lower lines, but it's a forecheck unit that works pretty well, and it's been productive.
Right. And I mean, this is a guy who has shown in years prior in his career that he can score. He can put the puck in the net if given the opportunity, if he's feeling it. You know, we're a few years past his arguably his peak of his career in Boston, which seems odd because that's a pretty early time to peak in one's career. But he could still be effective. You don't need Milan Lucic scoring goals for the Edmonton Oilers for him to be effective, and he is finding a way to do that. He's playing nasty. He's playing engaged. Yeah. He's a big physical force. He's being a presence, and that is that is a way he can contribute to the team. Just getting back to Mikko Koskinen for a second. Really kind of a cool redemption story. He had only before this season played 4 games in the NHL with the New York Islanders back in 2010, 2011. Didn't go so well for him back then, and he spent the next 8 or so seasons up until this past season when the Oilers signed him to that deal you mentioned. Kind of toiling away in the AHL. He bounced around in the European Elite Leagues for a bit. He played like the last 5 or 6 years in the KHL really put up some good numbers for St. Petersburg, and I think that was why it seemed that this guy's a legit starting goaltender now. The numbers he put up, they would transfer over potentially to the NHL, and he is proving the faith in the Oilers right. Not a young guy, 30 years old, so he's been around. He's a vet, and just always nice to see guys like that get a second chance and make good on it.
Yeah.
We are going to be back on Cabin Sports Radio. When we come back, we will have the Executive Director of Table Tennis ND, Thorsten Gohl, live on the phone from Fort Providence. Don't go away.
The Cabin Sports Radio Podcast, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Cabin Sports Radio, yes, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Joining us now on the phone live from Fort Providence, it's one of the hardest working men in the Northwest Territories when it comes to amateur sport, Thorsten Gohl, the Executive Director of Table Tennis NT. How you doing today, Thorsten?
I'm all good. Thank you.
So you're
Great to
up.
be here.
You are up in Fort Providence. What's going on there?
It's pretty mild today. It's good. We have the River Sports Circle come tomorrow for doing some lacrosse with our kids, so that's exciting. Yeah, it's pretty nice out here with frosted river and everything else. Yeah.
Okay, so you are gearing up for the Canada Winter Games. You mentioned to me off the air it's only the second time that Table Tennis NT has taken part in the Canada Winter Games since 1979. That's got to be exciting for you.
That's pretty cool indeed, yeah. When you think about it, I think 40 years ago it was just adults or some kids, but now it's changed the Canada Games structure, so it's now just kids, and yeah, we're pumped. I mean, we have started only a few years ago, and now here we are. We're participating in the Canada Games, and it's only the second time, so yeah, very exciting.
And you have basically been the catalyst for table tennis in the North. What was the scene like before you kind of arrived here?
I think before what had happened is there was the Arctic Winter Games, and it didn't need to be part of any sports organization, so you could just try out, and you need to find a host. So that's what it was, and I guess basement table tennis. After the 2008 games, I think, Arctic Winter Games in Yellowknife, there were some tables left, and so some schools had them, and it was just hidden there and there. But then when we came, and I always tell the story about Jim and Jeremy because they really started it all. They came to Vancouver, took some training course, saw me, and then brought me up. And that's how it all started, and then snowballed, and we had fun with it. So here we are.
And Thor, hey, Mike here. Wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the growth of the sport in more recent years and what you think you can attribute that growth to.
Yeah, I think table tennis is a great sport for the North. You don't need much. You really need a ball, and then you can figure out your own way. And so when we started about 4 or 5 years ago, again with James and Jeremy, they brought me up to the territories, going to clinics, doing clinics in schools, in the communities, and just make it accessible for people. And then we started to just bring tables in. So we bought some tables, the communities bought some tables. What we did is we went into the schools and said, hey, I want to take you set classes for the week and let me handle it. And the teachers loved it. We loved it. And that's how we started to grow. And here we are 2 or 3 years later now.
Okay, so you're gearing up for the Canada Winter Games in February. Why don't you fill us in on kind of the schedule for the next month or so for you?
Yeah, I think I can add to that is we will have the first ever official for table tennis from Team NT, so that's pretty cool too. Sherry Olsen from Fort Smith will be our official for the games, and she will not represent Team NT, but it's still pretty cool that she is part of Team NT. For the next few weeks, what we're going to do is we'll just come up with a schedule that works for all the kids. We're going to do training camps, training weekends, giving the kids the basics, a little bit of experience of gameplay, and most of all, we're just trying to do team building, so cheering on for each other. And then we have some fun things coming up as well that I won't share yet, but we will see at the Canada Games.
Thor, I think a lot of people would say that the growth of the sport is perhaps what's most important, but also if you get some of our younger residents, younger athletes heading down to national competitions like the Canada Winter Games and that growth, that's what's important. But what sort of expectations do you set maybe for yourself, but also for the athletes that would head down to these types of competitions?
For me, it's very important that they have fun, they're enjoying, they're representing the team itself, Team NT. They're proud of where they come from. And then just experience it. Again, you said it's a national competition. It doesn't happen that often every 4 years. You're coming, you're playing against future national, international athletes. You might not have a chance, but if you play that one point that is so much nicer than everybody else ever played it before, then that's a success, and that's all it is. A big smile to the kids. The fact that they can say, "Whoa, did you just see that shot?" I think those kind of the things that we're looking for.
So I'm going to take an opportunity to pump your tires a little bit here while we got you on the phone. You were the 2017 winner of the Ruth Inch Memorial Contributor to Sport Award at the Sport North Awards just a year ago. What does that sort of thing mean to you? I know you're a pretty humble guy for the most part, for the most part. But what does that sort of thing mean to you to be recognized by your peers like that?
I think it goes back to, it shows that everything is possible in the North. I think that's what it is, Have a crazy idea, bring a big German guy, put him in the middle of nowhere in the North Swiss territories and let him do. I mean, that's what the North represents for me. And I always say the true North, strong and free. That's just one of my catch lines. But I think there's so many amazing people in the North that it's I don't know what else to say, but it's just great to be part of it. It's great to connect with people, and I think all together, again, we can make the North much, much stronger.
So do you think that's the secret to success in general? Just bring a big German guy in and let him go, and away you go?
No, I wouldn't always say that, no. But I think people with crazy ideas and people with out-of-box thinking, just, let them go free sometimes, and then things are possible in North. And it doesn't need to be those people only. I mean, we have established programs for so many years. We have Olympians, we have national, international sports athletes in the Northwest Territories. And life is not always easy in the North, but I think if you really want something, then in the North, it's definitely possible.
And what are your plans the next few weeks or so? Of course, Christmas coming up. Are you sticking around, or are you heading home for a bit?
No, I'm going to stick around. I enjoy the quietness of the winter, finally catching up with some work here and there, and then preparation for the next few years, putting some more plans into place where we can actually engage with more communities. We have reached 16 communities in the last 2.5 years. We've brought 60 tables into the North. So we have been slower a little bit over the last little while, just because that's how it is. And now I want to engage a little bit more, come up with programs that we can bring into schools, make it easy for them, and then also help on the national level maybe.
The Canada Winter Games are still 2 months away, but we'll have some action this weekend, won't we?
That's true, yeah. We have the school championships, the territorial school championships happening in Yellowknife on Friday. There will be the doubles, and the deadline to sign up is on Wednesday. And the singles on Saturday. So there's age categories from grade 6 to high school. So doubles on Friday and then singles on Saturday. So again, last year we had a huge success. Let's see what happens this year. Sorry, it's a Validay High School in Yellowknife.
All right.
Validay High School, Validay School in Yellowknife.
We know you'll get it eventually.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Thor. Big thanks to you for taking the time out of your night. Obviously, you're a very busy man, and the work doesn't end even if everyone else is going on vacation for a week or so.
Thank you, guys, and it's great to have this opportunity, and I hope that more people take advantage of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. That's Thorsten Gohl, Executive Director of Table Tennis NT. Stick around. Cabin Sports Radio going to talk some Toronto Raptors coming up next.
The CSR Podcast.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. We move on to the NBA, where the Toronto Raptors are causing a little bit of havoc for Toronto basketball fans. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games, still sitting reasonably comfortably atop the Eastern Conference with a 21-7 record, still 7-3 in their last 10.
So why are we talking about
why are we talking about this?
Because they're in a major North American sports market, and if they lose 3 of 4, all hell breaks loose. I I think the most troubling thing right now is obviously the play of Kyle Lowry. Their heart and soul. Even when DeMar DeRozan was on the team, I think people recognize him as their best player per se, certainly their best scorer.
Right.
But Kyle Lowry was always the heart and soul of the Toronto Raptors. He's an absolute bulldog. Even with Kawhi Leonard now on the roster, anyone would be a fool to say he's not the best player, but I still think Kyle Lowry is the heart and soul, the leader.
Yeah.
He's the guy that will draw a charge in the dying minutes that will effectively secure a win. This year, distributing the ball unlike he ever has before, still, despite his recent slump, and it certainly is a slump, still leading the league in assists at 10 per game, but only 4 made field goals in his last 4 games, including a scoreless game yesterday against the Milwaukee Bucks, and that was alarming,
right,
given the fact that this is a 1-2 matchup. I think the conversation towards certainly towards the start of the season when the Raptors came out really hot, this is a team that can finally get over the hump now. LeBron James is in the Western Conference. They now have a bona fide top 5 NBA player talent in Kawhi Leonard. You're hoping to get that progression from Pascal Siakam, DeLon Wright, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and you've still got your heart and soul in Kyle Lowry. So this was sort of a big-ticket game. 1 and 2 teams in the East, and the Raptors came out on the losing end last night, 104-99. And Kyle Lowry didn't show up. I think if you're a fan, you're hoping there's an injury. I know that sounds funny to say, but
right,
you're hoping it's not a mechanical issue or a confidence issue. It doesn't seem like it is. He's still, even last night, was throwing up some late game shots. Just nothing. He couldn't hit the broadside of the barn right now, it feels like.
Well, and there has been a bit of a history with Kyle Lowry in potential, whether it's confidence issues or just mental lapses at potentially crucial times, like in the playoffs, where it seems like he just kind of disappears at the wrong times.
Right.
You would assume that, like you say, this is a different team. They've got new expectations. They're in a conference that one would have to think is monumentally weaker without LeBron James in it. But is there still now that thought kind of in the back of the mind that this is a team that should come out of the Eastern Conference really unscathed? But is Kyle Lowry and is this going to be a distraction, or is this something that people are thinking is going to maybe get progressively worse?
Certainly, if you go to the Twitter sphere, yes. No, and just pump the brakes. You're still 21-7. You're not only atop the East, you're atop the entire NBA. Granted, they do have a very tough stretch coming up, a number of road games in a row against some tough Western Conference foes. But I would still pump the brakes. He's still distributing the ball very well. Had some very good, crucial late game assists last night. Unfortunately, still came out on the losing side. But at least you're getting that production from him. He's still drawing charges. I think most people are thinking there's some type of minor injury there that he's laboring through. He's never really had a stretch this bad over the course of the regular season. I think there's 4 times in his career he's posted a scoreless game, last night being one of them. But the shot count, I think he only had 5 or 6 field goal attempts, all from deep, I want to say. So not an aggressive stat line at all, not trying to create his own offense. So that sort of leads me to think there is something going on there. He did also sit out a game earlier in the week, last week. Kawhi sat out once because of rest. He had a lingering issue. I can't remember what it was, but he did miss a game in the last week. And to be fair, too, the competition has been a lot higher of late. They had a visit from Denver, who's atop the Western Conference, Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek freak, who will always pose matchup problems, and they've surrounded him with really good shooters, playmakers like Bledsoe. They're going to be there, I think, towards the end of the season. A stinker of a loss against the Brooklyn Nets on Friday. But then in another marquee matchup against the Sixers, they came through. Kyle didn't play that great. But you're hoping it'll turn around. It's a very long season.
Right.
We're maybe just over a quarter of the way through. You figure someone of his caliber will turn things around. The Twitter sphere will say otherwise. But my thinking is there's some type of minor injury there that he'll be able to work through.
So he's human, you're saying?
He's human. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We'll find out really soon, though. There could be a good litmus test coming up here for the Raptors at Denver, at Golden State. They will be fully healthy, I believe. Draymond Green returning to action tonight. The Raptors beat them 2 weeks ago on their home court without him and Steph Curry.
Right.
You figure they're going to come out swinging, especially if people are tabbing this as a potential preview of what we could see in June. They got the Clippers, so a really tough Western Conference trip coming up. We should have a good indication of where this team truly lies
scary
by the end of next week.
Scary walking into play a Golden State team that actually has something to prove.
Yes, yeah, and a fully healthy team that might have a bone to pick with them after they beat them a couple weeks ago. And if people truly are tabbing this as an NBA Finals matchup, you know they're going to get up for that game. So they could come out pretty hot, so the Raptors will have to be good.
All right, we'll take a break and come back. We're going to talk a little bit of CFL news and then the Miami Miracle. Stay tuned for that. That's coming up next on Cabin Sports Radio.
Cabin Sports Radio. Download the CSR podcast at cabinradio.ca.
Finishing up things here on Cabin Sports Radio. A little bit of CFL news to pass along. Corey Chamberlain is the new head coach of the Toronto Argonauts, just signed today, replacing Mark Trestman, who was fired at the end of this past season. Comes to the Toronto Argonauts with quite a resume. He won both the 101st Grey Cup and the Coach of the Year award in 2013 as head coach of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Extensive playing career. Interesting, could be an interesting fit in Toronto. Don't know how that's going to work out, but then we never know how things are going to work out in Toronto.
They had a really bad year, 4-14, fresh off a Grey Cup win in 2017, and he played a key part in that as the team's defensive coordinator. His defense, a big reason why they were able to come out on top that year. Bad year last year, so hoping he's able to turn things around.
Still kind of personally surprised that Mark Trestman, after a Grey Cup and then a bad year, was turfed aside, but you know, it is what it is. Moving forward, Corey Chamberlain, there it is, the new head coach of the Toronto Argonauts for this upcoming season. Now, I normally am not more excited about NFL news than I am about CFL news, but something happened last night in the Miami Dolphins New England Patriots game that was so incredible. It is being called the Miami Miracle.
Pretty amazing. 34-33. Miami ends up winning the game on a last-second drive, no time on the clock, a 15-yard pass, I believe, which then turned into two straight laterals, which turned into a 52-yard dash from Kenyon Drake as time expired to win the game. And an important game, too. These are division rivals. The Patriots looking to clinch their 10th straight. Talk about divisional dominance.
Yeah.
Trying to clinch their 10th straight AFC East title.
And they will.
They will. Yes, they will. But not last night.
No.
Thanks to the heroics of Kenyon Drake. As time expired, 34-33 the final score. Miami improves to 7-6.
Yes.
Won't win the division, but are very much alive in the wild card race.
Yes.
So this was not a meaningless game, and it was probably the coolest way possible to end one. It reminded me of Madden. It was like a video game type ending. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, 3 games left in the NFL regular season, and like you say, this win puts the Miami Dolphins at 7-6 and keeps them in the hunt for the final playoff spot. Final playoff spot in the AFC wildcard race. A huge win for them, and you absolutely hear it in the calls from the announcers who. I had to do it. I had to grab the audio because you don't see plays like this happen. And I mean, we all know that pro football is derived from rugby. Its humble beginnings were in rugby. It became football when they introduced the forward pass. But every so often, and it's just so rare that you see a legit rugby play. I mean, it all started with a forward pass, but that's really neither here nor there. The rest of it with 2 legit rugby plays that end up leading to a incredible finish. Like You could not write a finish like that.
A play that they apparently had been practicing all year long,
yes.
according to their head coach, might have been assisted by the fact that Rob Gronkowski was on the field, which had a lot of people raising their eyebrows. He of course, is their all-star tight end.
Yeah.
So usually he's on the other side of the ball. But given he has 6 feet 5 inches to work with and 260 pounds, they thought, New England did, that this would be a Hail Mary type situation.
Yeah.
And that's when they would insert him in, keep him in to bat down those long balls. Not the case. Ended up getting burned by a much speedier Drake, when a smaller, speedier tackler would have made a lot more sense in that scenario. But we wouldn't be talking about this if the miracle didn't happen, and it truly was a miracle.
Obviously, hindsight is 2020, but when Miami was on their own 31, there's not a whole lot of quarterbacks that can throw the ball 70 yards with any degree of accuracy. So maybe New England should have thought that the Hail Mary was not what they were going for. As it turns out, yes, indeed, not what they went for at all. You will not forget the name Kenyon Drake after seeing this play. But for you to finish off this episode of Cabin Sports Radio, here are the calls. We've got first the Miami Dolphins broadcast team, and followed by the New England Patriots broadcast team. Have a great week. We will talk to you next Monday on Cabin Sports Radio.
Gronkowski standing at about the 15-yard line.
He couldn't tackle anybody.
I don't know why he's back there.
I know why. They throw it up. They throw it up in the air. He knocked it down.
That's exactly why. Tannehill, last shot, back to throw. They throw it down. They try to pitch it, and they do to Parker. Parker pitches it. And it's Drake! 30! 20! Gronkowski's got a tackle! No way! No way! Touchdown! The Dolphins win! Unbelievable! Are you kidding me? That is unbelievable! I don't believe what I just saw!
Tannehill for the Dolphins survey what he sees in front of him. A field of defensive backs and a hawking tight end who stands at the 15-yard line. Tannehill throws down the middle, caught by Stills, laterals back to Butler, or rather Parker, who flips it to Drake. He runs across the 40 of New England, angling inside to the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10. He's going to win the foot race to the end zone. The Dolphins are going to win it on the lateral. Once, then twice, and Drake takes it in. And the Patriots stand stunned in disbelief.
Mike, we got to fill in some silence here because the New England Patriots announcers were so stunned that they couldn't do it. We are in the midst of 34 seconds of silence on the air.
I just love it was between Drake and Gronkowski. You just hear him say, Jesus! That was it.
Jesus.
That was all she wrote.
All right, once again, that'll do it for this episode of Cabin Sports Radio. Guys, you wanna come back and readdress that one?
I don't know what to say.